Welcome back to Trinidad and Tobago. I'm Hema Ramkissoon, and this is the Morning Brew, a little off-air conversation with one of my favorite people, Daryl Joseph, a child psychologist. And Daryl joins us this morning to talk on a number of issues. Yesterday, the University of the West Indies, they held a conference, and that conference was headed by Professor Ramesh Devsuran, a well-known criminologist in Trinidad and Tobago. And according to the headline in one of the daily newspapers, and I'm going to read this very slowly, Devsuran, poor black males failing. Professor Emeritus Ramesh Devsuran said persons who are poor, of African descent, male, and from single-parent homes do less well in the education system than others. He made the observation, and this talk was equality of educational opportunities, race, class, and crime connection. Is there a connection as it relates to criminal activity and a tendency to go that way with race, class, and educational opportunities? In this talk, Devsuran said he didn't want to get anyone angry, but he had to say that there are certain influences that play a significant role in the children's lives. Daryl, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Morning, Hema. Morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Now, I just read a quick excerpt from that story.
Yeah.
And obviously, we look at race, class, and educational opportunities. And there's always a perception that those that go to the prestige schools are better, those that live in the urban areas are better. And he is saying that the black males, poor black males, and single-parent homes, that creates a breeding ground for criminal activity.
Okay. I do not have the benefit of having seen this study or seen the statistical work behind it. I like to make that very clear because when I speak from a point of view of my professional opinion, I want to make it clear. I want it to be on the record, it's my opinion. I don't think anything there is particularly startling or revolutionary in any sense. If anything, the research work may have simply validated what many of us know, that there's a definite, clear connection between education, between the way people turn out in terms of their behavior, in terms of criminality and so forth. We know that there's a very clear connection. There's also a connection which probably the study didn't really attempt to address that, but there's a connection as well in terms of the quality of upbringing. When I say quality of upbringing, I mean in terms of the family, what kind of exposure the child has growing up. And
let's talk about this concept. At one time, we look at this. There are different traditions all through the world. You've traveled to the Middle East, and you know, families are different to what families are here. So when we say the traditions of a family or a modern family, what are we speaking about?
Okay. You're talking about traditions of family. In Trinidad and Tobago, we tend to follow what's called the Western model, okay, which really derives from North America and Europe to an extent, all right? And what we've seen happening over the last 30, 40, 50 years even, is that the relationship, let's say, or the way that parenting takes place is changing, all right? Long time, I mean, my parents and the grands talk about it. They talk about the village raising the child. They talk about there being a collective sense of responsibility. They talk about a collective sense of values that everybody had and that everybody used to raise the next generation. That's changed a lot now.
So is it all the insulated family that we depend on? And I keep tying it back to a divisive education system, because I think when we say, because in that study they quote the government schools versus the denominational schools.
Yes.
But I don't know if that's a very bland statement to make, because maybe it's a different type of crime that's committed. There's white-collar crime, and then there's a crime that... and the white-collar criminals, I don't mean to sound stereotypical, but are normally those who come in the shirt and tie, who are able to swindle money through the system.
Exactly, and which government schools do most of them go to?
True, you know, so I don't know when we say that, if the education system is really creating criminals.
Yeah. If a person is not educated, it leaves them prone to many different things that could result in negative behavior. It leaves them prone to feeling victimized, to having a sense of, you know, maybe not be inferiority, lack of, and all of those things can contribute towards criminal behavior. But of course, as you're saying, that doesn't explain why we have white-collar criminals.
Exactly.
All right? I think on an even greater scale, and I go back to what I was saying earlier, we had a collective sense of values. This is what is expected. These are the things that we do. These are the things that we do. And this is right. This is wrong. We have far too many examples now in public life where the line between right and wrong is very blurry, if there's any line at all.
Has there ever been a line at all? And I'm talking about even from the days when we first gained independence. There are stories of, was there ever a time when we can look to role models? You know, when people take look at the role models in your society,
Yes.
it's always, even when young girls call me and their mothers call and they say, my 8-year-old daughter looks at you and my 10-year-old daughter looks at you and I make her look at you every morning. It's always a little overwhelming because I feel as though, okay, I don't know whether I even deserve that.
Yes.
But where do you find these role models?
It is really very difficult to do that now. Huh? It wasn't like that before. I agree with you on that. I can remember when President Obama was elected in 2008. It's the first time I felt a sense of, hey, this is a guy, you know, I want to know more about him and I really respect what he's done. It's the first time I felt that in a very long time. I think people just don't have a sense anymore of the fact that people are watching you and that there are things expected of you and that your behavior is going to have an impact on other people around you. People are more kind of insulated into themselves.
Do you think in the education system you should then integrate morals and ethics and religious? Because,
absolutely.
You know, corporate governance, even when I'm doing my MBA, that is a huge course, and they teach you, there's a huge component of ethics.
Yes.
Where the school that I attend, which is the Arthur Lockjack Credit School, they said that at that time you needed to teach that.
Yes,
there's a lack of it. But is it too late to teach somebody? Because we're talking about people who are like been through the system.
Okay, it's never too late to teach somebody, but honestly, this is something that needs to be properly thought out, and it needs to be taught from kindergarten level come up. Now, ideally, children should learn these lessons at home.
That's my other point. I mean, I don't think you need a teacher to tell you you can't take what's not yours.
You should not.
And you should not steal,
You shouldn't.
you should not lie. I don't think you need that.
But I have lived in Canada for a few years, in the early 2000s. And one of the first things that struck me there was the support systems that are in place for not just family life, but just to support good ethics, good morals, good values. A simple example, I remember, I think, going out into the mall or something, and I was overwhelmed by the number of young fathers I saw carrying their children. Just young fathers, just going through a normal mall. It seemed strange to me at the time. Is
there an extra pressure on fathers now? And there seems to be this thrust, because I've noticed that there's this group, Fathers Rock, all of these things where they are looking at the role of the father in terms of developing a child.
Yes. Now, I don't have the research to back it up, but it's a theory that I would really like to research and have it done properly one day. I believe the role of fathers in the upbringing of a child is severely understated. There seems to be a perception that mothers are the most important and that fathers kind of tag along and support. If anything, it might even be the other way around. I think there are certain things that a father can instill into a child that is more difficult for a mother to do. And I'm talking about things like self-respect, self-worth, a sense of control, a sense of discipline, order, those kinds of lessons. I'm not saying a mother can't teach them, but I'm just saying instances where I have seen a strong father head a home, those kinds of lessons tend to be picked up by the children quickly.
And what do you think is a strong father? Is it the authoritative figure? Is it the father that disciplines? Is it, what is a strong father? And what are some of the examples that our males should be looking at?
Right, okay. So there's a difference between authoritative and authoritarian. Authoritarian is the do as I say, don't even bother to question what I do. All right? Authoritative, which is what we should really be aiming at. All right? Authoritative parents are clear in their conviction, clear in what they teach. But at the same time, they're willing to listen. They're willing to give some compassion and some tenderness and some understanding and so forth. But at the end of the day, they are the parent. And they're not trying to befriend their child and make sure that their child likes them and wants to align with them and hang out. I mean, they're sure they will hang out eventually at some point. But an authoritative parent, an authoritative father, knows what he's about.
You know, it's interesting. I went to a talk the other day, and they were looking at the roles of women in choosing these fathers, and they were talking about the breeding ground in these at-risk communities.
Right.
And they were calling on the women to be more selective.
Yes.
On who you decide to be a particular mate or to father your child.
Yes. And you know, the experience that women have of fatherhood growing up feeds directly into the kind of person they choose later on as a partner. Huh?
Explain that a little bit.
Human beings are experiential learners. We don't learn primarily by reading something or by hearing something being, said to us. We learn by experience, right? Little children learn, they observe, they experiment, they try things, and they learn gradually. That's the natural way of learning. So there's a lot of lessons that are learned sort of subliminally, subconsciously. They're not really overt, but they're learned anyway. The way you observe your father interacting with your mother, assuming he's there at all, the way you see your father interacting with your mother and with other people, it builds a pattern in a young child's mind of what a father's supposed to look like. All right? When you see a man being abusive to a woman, emotionally abusive, insulting her, putting her down, not showing any affection, not showing any concern, it subliminally programs that picture of what a husband or what a father's supposed to look like into a child's mind. It's not surprising that you find that people, young women who grew up in abusive homes, for example, or even men who grew up in abusive homes, that they either end up with somebody who also is abusive, or in some cases, they become the perpetrator themselves. And oftentimes you talk to them and they don't understand why. They tell you, they don't understand why they keep picking the wrong person, or they don't understand why they can't keep themselves under control. But a lot of that behavior has been programmed into them by their experience of fatherhood.
Now, looking at, we're talking about the fatherhood and looking at the role of a father and looking at the role of a mate. Do you think that a lot of it then, would you subscribe to that, that women also in these at-risk communities, or anywhere, because you can't stereotype people, because I think you could see a suit and tie and you could end up having a crazy person, no matter where, women and men. So let me put it the other way around. What do you really look at in a particular way if you are moving to have a family or you consider your children? And there's also the juxtaposition of people who have children and are entering into another relationship.
All right. So there's no way that you can do a test or do an assessment or take some kind of thing and measure, okay, I'm ready now. All right? But at a minimum, I would say, if you're going into a relationship and if you're thinking about settling down and family, please make sure that you're putting into the relationship as much as you're getting out of it. If you're getting into a relationship to get away from something, or because you are not happy and you think if you get into a relationship you will magically just become happy because of the other person, you're probably not ready. You have to have a sense of peace and a sense of comfort with who you are and what you bring to the table before you even think about becoming the parent. Because when you make that transition from being single person into parent, you talk about life changes.
But can you teach proper parenting skills? Do you really do that?
Yes, you can.
Because, you see the other thing about people saying that, why are they having children so young? Why are they having children so old? How do you really teach people to be parents? And if you are influenced by what you know as the norm, you could have been brought up in a very dysfunctional home.
Yes.
What's to say that you stop that cycle?
Yeah. As I was saying, this is something it's not going to change overnight, but it needs to be well thought out and it needs to be implemented from the ground up, from little children, all right? There was a time when school teachers were considered, you gave a school teacher nearly or the same kind of respect that you gave to a parent. And in many cases, for many children, teachers became like parents to them, all right? That's one of the serious areas that I think needs to be examined more closely, because we have far too many people who get into teaching because it's a job and it pays than who are necessarily called.
It's funny, I share that view completely. I believe that teachers are born.
Yes.
No matter what they say, leaders are born.
Agreed.
Those are things that I think are a higher calling, and you are exuding those qualities. I also want to talk quickly, Daryl, about talking sex. Yesterday, we had members of the HIV/AIDS committee working with the government, and they again spoke about the fact that young girls are getting involved with older men, and they were looking at the at-risk age group. They also said that parents must start speaking to their children about sex.
Absolutely.
Because you see situations with young girls, 13, 14, ending up with these older men.
Yes.
Also, there was a situation with a young girl, she was 18, she had 2 kids, her battered images on the front page of the paper. If you're 18 and you have 2 kids, she's obviously been involved with this man since 15 or 16.
That's right.
The man at that time would have been 18, 19, a lot older than her. How do you really start speaking to your children about sex? What do you tell them? At what age is it appropriate to say, this is the birds and the bees talk?
Okay. The generally accepted thing these days tends to be around preteen years, all right? Some would even say from as early as 7 or 8. The thing is, you don't want to bombard your child with graphic images that they're not prepared to handle. And many people feel that, you can't talk about sex without it becoming very mechanical and without talking about the mechanics of it. Children don't need to know that, They need to know that there's a mommy and a daddy. All right? And they need to know that I'm talking about little kids, right?
So if you're talking to a child, because obviously now their images, I know we have a couple minutes to wrap this interview, the images now that they're bombarded with, even they look at TV and they will be promoting another show.
Yes.
You see some things that with physical intimacy that they may not be aware of. What do you say? That's an intimate kiss. That's a French kiss. What do you
That's
really
for
say?
mommy and daddy. All right? That's for adults.
Okay.
Okay? Simple things like that, but you make sure and address it. All right? Because the biggest tragedy would be to let those images pass and allow the children to form their own opinion of what's going on without it being addressed by their parents, the people who are supposed to address it.
Now, if you are dealing with a young child, and also this situation with the younger girls and older men, girls obviously mature at a faster rate than boys are, and that's scientifically proven.
Yes.
How do you then deal with that? What do you tell your girl children? I know, like at the age of 15, 16, when I had my first boyfriend, but parents didn't know. It was crazy,
They don't know.
They don't know. You look at that and it's always a little crazy because girls really probably always want to experience things a lot faster than boys do.
Yes. But that particular example you were talking about there with the sugar daddy syndrome, you never be amazed at what kind of things can come out when a person is hopeless, when a person feels that there's no other way out. That kind of behavior is as a result, mainly, of a young girl thinking, look, there's no way I'm going to make it on my own. There's nobody there for me, so this is my only resort.
Closing comments, Daryl. I know we touched on a number of issues this morning,
things, right?
ranging. What would you like your daddy to be able to know?
I would just like to make a plug again for fathers in particular and for the whole issue of parenting on the whole. Parenting and family life needs more support in this country. There needs to be more things to do on a weekend other than go to the beach. All right? We need to have other things in place, and we need to begin teaching the right values from kindergarten age come up.
How important is that family time? And I also want to juxtapose it with the young couple and the older couple as well, because you can go from one extreme to the other.
Yeah.
You can become so involved with your children's life that when they leave, there's nothing there in the home.
That's right. Balance.
How do you find that balance with how important is that family time, and how do you split that family time, intimate time with your loved one and your offsprings? Critical,
extremely important, right? If the relationship, just like a plant, if the relationship is not nurtured, eventually it withers and dies, okay? So even in the midst of raising kids, you need to set aside a Friday, every other Friday, every Saturday, whatever it is, that's just for yourself and your partner. Let somebody look after the children. The children need a break from you as well.
I know, my parents never understood that. We're going to go straight to a break, and we're going to check in with Judy Canai now to find out what's happening in the world of business. And when we come back, we're going to tell you about the handicraft fair. Stay with us. Thanks, Dad.